The Russian-Ukrainian war is arguably in one of its most active phases right now. While there is a decrease in combat intensity in some frontline areas, in others is quite the opposite, with an increase. Additionally, a new direction towards Kharkiv has emerged. Looking at the simple graph of clashes, it is evident that the May 11 was a record-breaking day with 155 clashes recorded. There is also a clear trend of escalation. Hey, my name is Alex, and this is a quick update on the Russian-Ukrainian war from the perspective of someone living within it. And here is how the changes on the map look for the week in the hypothetical southern Donetsk sector, which was one of the most active and where the Russian army made the most significant advancements. Near Ocheretino, where they were previously advancing actively, as we can see, there were no advancements. Regarding the results of territory losses or gains, for the 18th weeks of 2024, Ukraine regained control of 0 square kilometers, lost control or gray zone 197 square kilometers, Russia seized 123 square kilometers and lost control or gray zone 0.54 square kilometers. And here is another set of statistical data. I promise this is the last for this episode, but it's also important. Statistics of losses for both sides for May 11th. Red color, losses of the Russian armed forces, 45 units. Blue color, losses of the Ukrainian armed forces, 34 units. The ratio is not shifting in favor of the Ukrainian armed forces. Hopefully this is a temporary phenomenon. Among the most valuable equipment destroyed by the Russians are two of our Mi-24 attack helicopters, which were parked in the open for refueling. Behind them was our transport Mi-8 helicopter, but it seems it was not damaged. Most likely the helicopter were hit by a barrage bomb D-30 SM-UMB, a relatively new type of bomb in the Russian army. However, among the Russian forces stationed in the occupied Crimea, specifically in the city of Jankoy, a helicopter also crashed. The official version is failure of aviation equipment. And now let's proceed with an overview of the situation on the front lines. Kharkiv sector of the front. The enemy has occupied the villages of Morokhovets and Olenikovo. Battles continue for Gluboki, in the central part of which the enemy has planted its flag, Lukyanцы and Ziline. In the Hostry Khartuzi video, strikes are being made on the enemy infantry in trenches east of Gluboki. And in these frames, the same Hostry Khartuzi unit continues to destroy Russian infantry in position near the village of Lyukyanivtsi. The enemy is attempting to advance towards the village of Liptsi, but reaching the village will not be as easy. Footage shows the missiles and bomb strikes on Ukrainian defense positions south of Gluboki. It's worth noting the precision of Russian weaponry, or rather its absence. Fortunately, all hits missed our positions, landing in the fields. Ukrainian forces have launched a series of strikes on enemy vehicles and concentrations on the village of Oktyabrski in the Belgorod region, Russia. Footage shows the destruction of an enemy armored vehicle by a Ukrainian drone. Losses on the Ukrainian side have also been recorded. Footage shown our 155mm self-propelled artillery unit Bogdana on a Tatra chassis destroyed near the village of Borshova, 15 kilometers from the border with Russia. There is also online video from the enemy showing the moment of its destruction by the Lancet. Battles are ongoing in the southern and southeastern outskirts of the village of Khatishchi and the Oktyabrski forestry. Footage shows strikes on a tank garage moving towards Volchansk at the Russian checkpoint on the border. As we can see, they are attempting to use these makeshift tank shelters here as well. The enemy continues to bomb Volchansk and surrounding areas. Isolated Russian sabotage and reconnaissance groups have been observed on the outskirts of Volchansk and near the Volchansk meat processing plant. They are actively being attacked by FPV and artillery, resulting in significant enemy losses. The situation in the city itself remains unchanged. Defense in the city is being reinforced. Footage confirms fighting under Vovchansk. Overall, after the initial days, when there was some disarray or even slight panic, the situation now appears to be under control by the Ukrainian defense forces. Photos show the deployment of additional forces by Ukraine to the Kharkiv sector, Kupiansk sector of the front. No changes on the map have been recorded in recent days. During aerial reconnaissance, border guards of the main operational search unit Luhansk discovered several units of enemy equipment camouflaged in casemates in these directions. Armored tractor MTLB and a combat reconnaissance vehicle were destroyed by the Pomsta units, Liman direction. In recent days, the Russians conducted a series of powerful offensive actions towards Terny, Yampolivka, Torske. The Russians made several attempts to break through, employing a total of 10 units of equipment with infantry. The morning assault began with 3 BMPs and 2 tanks. Although repelled, not without losses, a significant amount of enemy infantry was trapped in the forest. The Russians managed to capture 2 positions, but for such an assault, it is clearly a failure. Footage of repelling the Russian assault is of Torske by the fighters of the 63rd Separate Mechanized Brigade. Notably, the Russians equipped all their equipment with various types of electronic warfare, but other fighters prepared a surprise, and the EW turned out to be ineffective. It's worth noting the work of the artillerymen, who skillfully worked burning down the equipment with the troops. During this battle, the brigade destroyed a total of 5 tanks and 5 BMPs. And here are the scenes of these battles through the eyes of the Ukrainian infantry. The burning inferno of the forest near Yampolivka on the Lyman direction. The Russians themselves, as always, began to celebrate victory and great breakthrough, but realizing that the attack had failed, they began to put up posts about unsuccessful assault. Here, Russian also reports the loss of a Russian assault group in the Klishchiivka area, near Chasiv Yar direction. We will analyze it a bit later. And in these shots, prisoners of the Russian army captured by the soldiers of the 2nd Operational Battalion of the Rubish Brigade on the same direction, Siveris direction. On the southeast outskirts of Belgorod, Russian forces continue their attempts to dislodge the defense forces from positions near the Cholk quarry, attacking with tank support. Here, the 81st Separate Airborne Assault Brigade has been holding the defense firmly for a year and a half now. Recently, enemy assaults were also recorded in the area of the settlement of Berestova, unsuccessfully. The situation remains unchanged. Footage from the Serebryansky forest, a nature reserve which has become the site of the fiercest battles with the Russians, who brought the worst inferno to our lands, a gem of nature turned into a burning hell that brings death. Video from soldiers of the 1st Presidential Operational Brigade Burevi and the Operational Battalion Forpost of the National Guard Unit, Chasiv Yar sector. A high tempo of combat operations is maintained west of Bogdanivka. Footage shows the clearing of Russian positions in the area of this village through the eyes of the soldiers of the 24th Separate Mechanized Brigade. During the operation, the exchange fund was replenished with Russian military prisoners. Fighting is also ongoing in the area of Dachas, northeast of the Canal neighborhood. And this is the current look of the same Canal neighborhood in the city of Chasiv Yar. Additionally, battles are taking place in the Stupki-Holubovsky 2nd Reserve. In the area of the latter, on the map, the enemy advance have been noted. It is not a rapid advance, but rather a clarification of gradual progression over the past months of fighting. The enemy continues to push towards the Siversky-Donetsk-Donbass Canal. It is worth noting that the intensity of assaults has noticeably decreased here recently. Avdiivka direction. The enemy has advanced along the forest belt east of Novopokrovsk over the stretch up to 650 meters wide. Active combat operations continue. West of Semenivka and Orlivka, the enemy has advanced over the stretch up to 3.5 kilometers wide and up to 1.1 kilometers deep towards Umansky. Before heading to Kharkiv region, soldiers of the 1st Assault Battalion of the 92nd Separate Assault Brigade made quite an impact in Donetsk region, creating a real hell for the Russians. Footage captured their activity in this direction. Area of Krasnohorivka. Soldiers of the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade burned down an enemy tank. Judging by the scale of the explosion, the tank was fully loaded with ammunition. Farther down on the map, in the same direction, in Netailove, enemy infantry advanced along Naberezhny Street up to 280 meters deep. Overall, it seems that despite the Russians' attempts to advance fully on this front, they have succeeded only in significantly slowing down. And this is despite the fact that the Russians are trying with all their might, experimenting with various means and tactics. So in this footage, the destruction of a Russian APC equipped with several electronic warfare systems using drones with AI guidance. Regular drones couldn't approach due to the EW activity. The operators of the strike drone company of the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade, Magura, are credited with this action. Sometimes the Russians attempt to break through even on motorcycles or golf carts. In the footage, the destruction of more Russian golf enthusiasts on the same front. Video from the soldiers of the 25th Separate Airborne Brigade. Kharkiv direction. Heavy fightings continued for the town of the Krasnohorivka and the village of Georgievka. The enemy is deploying reserves to the southern part of Krasnohorivka and is preparing to increase pressure in the coming days. Vuhledar direction. No changes are observed on this point. Area of Novomikhailivka. Operators of the strike drone unit Perun Group of the 79th Separate Assault Battalion share footage of the destruction of Russian equipment and infantry during an attempted assault on this front. Velikonovoselivsky direction. The direction remains quite active. The Russians are attempting to improve their positions near Urozhainy and advance in Staromayorsk, so far unsuccessfully. Operators of the strike drone from the 20th Separate Special Purpose Battalion of the Separate Presidential Brigade are destroying Russian equipment during an attempt to attack the defense forces on this front. Robotino sector. The enemy has entrenched itself west of Verbove on the front width of up to 2 kilometers. Tavria sector. No significant changes have been recorded. Russian artillery is actively being destroyed here. For example, it was reported on May 12th that 8 Russian cannons were destroyed on the left bank of Dnieper River alone. Their artillerymen are perishing there alongside the infantry. Also on this trench, the surrender of Russian soldier on the left bank has been recorded. Ukraine top want to be captured, is written on the placard. I'm not entirely sure if it's not fake though. So moral and psychological state of the Russian personnel is far from good, especially when our small group in Krinky, drones and artillery from the right bank are tying down all the enemy forces on the left bank. And the Russians themselves openly admit it, emphasizing that the only motivation for them to fight is substantial monetary rewards. I'll remind you that just for signing a contract with the Russian army in some regions of Russia they offer around $10,000. Therefore, Ukraine should continue to target Russian oil refineries, reducing the possibility of funding the war. Well, now let's take a look at the events related to the war that occurred beyond the immediate front line. So, in Belgorod city, Russia, a blast caused the collapse of multi-story building entrance recorded. According to the Russian Ministry of Emergency Situation, 15 people died and 70 were rescued. Of course, the Russian Ministry of Defense blames Ukraine for everything, saying that the explosion occurred when a part of a .U missile, allegedly shot down by the Russian air defense, hit the building. Well, first of all, Ukraine ran out of these missiles a long time ago, and no one else in the world produced them anymore. It is an old Soviet-era missiles. And secondary, there is plenty of evidence that the explosions came from inside the building or from the Russian side. The moment of the explosion in Belgorod captured from the inner courtyard. No missiles are visible in the footage. It's also noticeable that the explosion comes from inside the building. Judging from the satellite images, the facade of the building on Shorsa Street in Belgorod, where the entrance collapsed, is roughly parallel to the border between Russia and Ukraine. Thus, the external side of the building faces northeast into the depths of Russia territory, while the inner courtyard part of the building is directed southwest towards Ukraine. So the explosion occurred on the external side of the building from the Russian side. Knowing the quality of the Russian bombs and how often they have been known to misfire en route to their target, it's more likely that the Russians simply dropped their own bomb on their own building. Also, there is some video of missiles debris from the S-300 or 400 air defense systems allegedly found in the ruins of this multi-story building. But the version involving an unplanned bomb drop still seems the most probable to me. Also, Ukrainian drones struck the Volgograd oil refinery. By the way, this is the second drone attack on the region in the last days. Drones already harassed the Lukoil Volgograd oil refinery on the night of May 11th. In Krasnodon, occupied Luhansk region, Ukraine launched a missile strike on an ammunition depot. The shortest distance is 130 kilometers from the front line, so most likely the strike was carried out with ATACMS missiles. And that wraps up today's video. If you found this information helpful or somehow insightful, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. And I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye!